Corey. So again, Kari with the Snohomish Conservation District. And yeah, if you have any questions throughout this, I'll give you ways to go through the chat. And then also for question and answer, we will do that too. Alternatives to lawn is our topic this evening. And so we are sponsored by the City of Everett, and we're so grateful for their support. They want these workshops to happen because it's a priority for them to have the public be educated about the importance of stormwater and runoff. So when it hits the ground and then it takes pollutants and other things into our storm drains, we need to find ways to prevent that from happening. So natural yard care is a great way to do that. So when you have natural yard care practices, it can help with our local water quality. So thank you to the City of Everett for sponsoring these workshops. Another partner and supporter of these is Washington State University Snohomish County Extension. And so tonight we have someone from Master Gardeners with us, and then also Snohomish Conservation District. And so we are your local district in this area. So this evening, please use the chat if you have any questions, technical questions, something's not working and you want to know why, I will try and help you. And then also for the questions, please, if you could put them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. Philomena will be helping me answer those questions this evening. And so type them when you have the thought in your head, and then there's a few breaks throughout David's presentation. We'll be able to take a moment to go over those, and then also at the end, we'll certainly have plenty of time for questions too. So Snohomish Conservation District, we are one of 5 conservation districts across the state of Washington. Our history goes back to the Dust Bowl when literally soil was blowing away. So at a federal level, they asked the states to manage this. And so we work cooperatively with people, private landowners, cities, other partners, and just try and protect natural resources. So water, air, soil, things like that. Backyard habitat, birds and animals and such. We offer technical assistance, cost share, which is funding for projects, engineering and site plans. We do outreach and education like this, including youth education in the schools. And we have a ton of information on our website. So by all means, check that out. And we've done a lot of webinars this year. So we have a reservoir on our YouTube channel of things we've already talked about this year. So upcoming workshops for the district, I want to make sure everyone knows it's Orcatober, woohoo! So we're celebrating orca whales, and we're doing things that can protect their habitat and restore our Chinook salmon runs. So a lot of that is fish passage projects, restoration, native plant barriers. Also, rain barrels are great to keep that water from running down the street, rain gardens, all kinds of things. We also have on our website, the events page, a list of a bunch of different webinars coming up this month. Next week, we're doing another one with the City of Everett and WSU on rain gardens. And so by all means, if you have questions, you want to learn about rain gardens, we'll have a presentation and then a time for questions and answers at the end of that. Also, if you register, we have a map of rain gardens in the north part of Everett. And so you can do your own self-guided tour to check out what the rain gardens look like in different stages of their lives. Some of them have been in place for 19, 20 years, and some of them are just there about 10 years, and some are just a year or two old. So you'll get to see how they perform and look over time. To register for that, you can go to everett.eventbrite.com. And then another thing that we had mentioned for this webinar in particular was the Monte Cristo Award, and that is tied to the City of Everett. They've been going since 1994, and there's 4 different categories, but the one that we're really aiming for you to think about is the Green Gardening Award. So it's given to homeowners who have implemented natural or green gardening practices, and all the things that David's going to talk about tonight can help you do that. So if you live in the City of Everett, be sure to check out the Monte Cristo's Awards on the Everett website. And if you have any interest in volunteering or being a part of that process, you can email montecristoawards@gmail.com. Neighborhood leaders and volunteers and other community members are the ones that are moving this initiative forward. It got skipped for 2020 because of COVID, because we all know that 2020 we would not recommend. It's been a rough one, but it will be back next year. So get your gardening going, and maybe you'll win one of those awards. So the other people I wanted to introduce, and then I will pass this off to David. April Hines, she is the Public Information Education Specialist with the city. She works in Public Works. There's her contact information. So, and I'll have this slide, you'll see this on YouTube later, so you can contact April if you have any questions about the city and the rain garden program, rain barrels, and other things that they do for natural yard care. And she wanted me to mention that they are doing a rain barrel sale this Saturday, so October 17th from 9 to noon. It'll be down at the Public Works building. That's at 3200 Cedar Street in Everett, kind of close to I-5 down there. They have a parking lot behind there. Mask will be required. Bring a check instead of cash, and you'll need to pick your barrel and load it into your vehicle on your own. But if you're looking to have a way to get 55 gallons of water away from your foundation or from running down the street, this is a great opportunity. So that's this Saturday, and you can find it on their website. So also with me tonight is Philomena Kedziorsky. She's with Snohomish County, the WSU Extension Program, and so she's the Rain Garden Program Coordinator. So if you ever do a rain garden with the City of Everett, she would probably be the ones that would help you pick your plants for what will be in the garden. The district helps with that too. But also she wanted me to share master gardeners, and if you've ever had a plant question, you didn't know what it was or you didn't know what was happening with it, so something looks too brown or too dry or too green or something's going on, bugs or pests, call WSU, talk to one of their master gardeners. Generally what happens is they may not have the answer immediately, but they'll research it and then call you back. So sending plant pictures is really great because then they know what you're talking about. So without further ado, then I would like to pass this off to David Jackson, my colleague. So he's our Community Conservation Program Manager. So he's the one who runs our CC team, we call them. But these are the folks that are out mostly in the urban areas. So they do a lot of rain gardens, they do deep paved projects and all kinds of cool stuff. So David will be walking through the alternatives to lawn. So really, we just want to thank you for being here tonight. And David, go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Hi, everyone. I think Kari covered most of that. I do just want to say I really am kind of bummed that we are not all in the same room. I always kind of feed off the energy that you guys bring to these presentations. But as we know, 2020 has been a heck of a year. So this is my normal alternatives to lawn presentation. If you've come to one of my classes before, you'll recognize a lot of it. But I did have to make some updates for this remarkable year. So just look for some of that as we go along. So the Snohomish Conservation District, Kari explained a little bit of what we do. I'm going to explain a little bit more of kind of what we are. We are a subgroup of the state government. We are kind of an interesting little chimera because we are mandated by the federal government. We are supported by the state government, or we are part of the state government, and we're supported by the county government. So we stratify a lot of different layers. We serve Snohomish County. We also serve Camano, which is part of a partnership we have with Island County. We are fully non-regulatory, meaning that we don't enforce any rules and we can't really get you in trouble for anything. I mention this because if you want us to come out to your property to look at something, but you're a little bit concerned that, a wetland scientist like me may see something that's going to get you in trouble. That's not what we do. We're just there to help. We don't enforce any rules, and we're not going to rat you out to anybody. I'm the program manager for the community conservation team. We focus primarily on urban, suburban, and exurban communities. We deal with a lot of things that would commonly be referred to as green infrastructure, such as green stormwater infrastructure and urban agriculture. That's sort of what our focus is. We do a lot of different stuff around the district, but that's most of where we work. And as a result, we work with a lot of people and groups of people. And above all, we are here to help. That is the number one thing that we do. We're not here to cause any problems. We're here to help people do the kind of stuff that they want to do. So I want to talk a little bit about lawns in the United States. I know that this is alternatives to lawns, so let's talk about what we are pushing the alternative for. Turf lawns are the single largest irrigated crop in America. They use more water than a lot of other commonly grown crops that we might think of. All of the total lawns in the United States make up an area slightly larger than the state of Georgia. We spend a lot of gas, we spend a lot of water, we spend a lot of money and time maintaining these lawns. And they don't do a lot for us. So, if you do like your lawn, I think you're in the wrong class, but I'm definitely not going to try to talk you out of it too much. I think lawns are great for things like dogs and kids. But there are ways to really sort of improve your yard. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So what are alternatives to those? Well, the three major alternatives that we're going to talk about tonight are native gardens, low impact gardens, and sustainable landscaping. There's a lot of overlap. They kind of go back and forth, but those are sort of the three major categories that we're going to cover. Before we start in, I do want to give you some disclaimers about the advice that I'm going to give you tonight. I am not omniscient. All of my advice comes with a grain of salt. All gardens are unique. Every site is a little bit different. I have never been to 2 yards that I was like, yep, these are identical. So I'm not going to, a lot of what you may ask is going to, a lot of these questions may have to be answered with, it depends, or we'll have to see, or I need more information. I'm not trying to blow you off. It's just that things really are specific, and you can get very bad advice if you get blanket advice. So I'm not going to try to give you blanket advice. Most of what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to introduce ideas, and then I'm going to try to direct you towards resources so that you can kind of do a lot of this work yourself. Again, that's not necessarily blowing you off. That is because if you're here, I think that you will probably have fun doing some of this stuff yourself. And I want to give you the opportunity to have as much fun as the rest of us do. And of course, you can always contact SCD. We like being contacted. We like fielding questions. So please go ahead and contact us, and we will be happy to answer your question in detail. Again, we are here to help. That is what we are for. So a quick introduction to native gardening. A native garden is just a garden that uses either plants that are native or plants that we call nativars. It's a combination of native and cultivar. They are, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, beautiful landscapes. They also have a lot less inputs required. They don't require as much maintenance. They don't require as much watering. They don't require as much time, effort, and input. Plants are native if they occur in this area naturally. There are some plants that have been naturalized. Those can also be native. There's a little bit of gray area there. But the main thing that we want is we want plants that are adopted to our hydrologic cycle, our kind of, it's dry in the summer, wet in the winter, and our temperature, our soil types, our flora and fauna. We want plants that are adapted in that way. So we're going to be talking about a few different types of native gardening. Backyard habitats, rain gardens, native prairies, edible gardens, and then moss and clover lawns. There are a lot more. I could probably do a full 101 class on types of native gardening. If there's something on this list, you're like, oh man, I really hope they were going to talk about blank. Again, reach out to us, because if I won't bend your ear about it, I know somebody at the district will. So backyard habitats are the first one we're going to cover today. And backyard habitats are wonderful places to really be able to observe nature, essentially. They're usually, they consist of places for birds and bees and different wildlife to eat, rest, and then grow and then birth and spawn and grow young. There's a lot of different types of wildlife in the area, and kind of what you want to attract will inform your plant choices. I've heard some folks say that, oh, well, I only have a small yard. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can help. You actually, if you only have a small yard, you may be the most impactful, because those yards will form what we call patch habitat. And things like birds and bees will use that as they migrate to sort of stop over. You'll be kind of like a bird or a butterfly Motel 6. You'll just, they can stop over, they can kind of rest up and be okay, and then move on. More so than they would get in an urban environment otherwise. You're also going to help nearby farms and yards be more productive. And if you have any inclination to do edible gardens yourself, you will definitely be helping your own edible garden. So first thing that we'll talk about is pollinator habitats. Pollinator habitats, there's lots of different types of pollinators. Mason bees are a really common one. Butterflies are another one. The mason bees are not dangerous. They don't sting. They have adorable little houses, and they're very fun. I think they're just delightful to watch. The other upside of this is that pollinator habitats usually include lots of really brightly colored flowers and trees. So if you are really amped up to get a lot of color in your yard, pollinator habitat might be exactly what you're looking for. This is one of my favorite posters. It's in my old office that I moved, and every day I pass by and think about stealing it. This is a great poster that illustrates that it's not just flowers that really work well for pollinators and bees. There's lots of full-size trees that work as well. Big leaf maple is very common around here. Crabapple, for Halloween, man, if you have some crab apples in your yard, you make the best spooky house for Halloween. Flowering dogwood, Pacific flowering dogwood is native. Lots of beautiful, beautiful willows, but I'm partial because I'm a wetland person. There are lots of great full-size trees that you can get to support pollinators. You can also get birds. We all love the Anna's hummingbirds. We see a lot of them. Similarly, trees and flowers. Ponds are a really cool stopover to put in. Depending on how deep you want to go, you can get different types of birds. And then you can really enjoy migration season. Different birds that you normally wouldn't see very much will stop over in your backyard on their way north or south. And it's a real kind of fun thing to watch with the changing of the seasons. And the ubiquitous hummingbirds. I could talk about hummingbirds for days, but they're really not hard to coax into your backyard, and they're just delightful. This one is always controversial for some reason. I love bats. I think bats are wonderful. I think they're adorable. I have a flying fox over there on the upper left, and it's a soft brown. Oh gosh, I can't remember the last time that I put it in here. I think it's a soft brown pygmy in the bottom right. Bat boxes are what you see there on the left. They're very slim. They're very unobtrusive. You can get a lot of bats in there, and they do an incredible job just ripping through the insect population. So if you are like, I love being outside, but I hate being outside with the mosquitoes, a bat box is absolutely the answer to your problem. I will not talk about bats for hours, but I definitely could. I will simply say that a lot of bats in the Pacific Northwest are endangered or at risk because of habitat loss, and a bat box in your backyard would be going a long way to helping them. So one of the cool things that a lot of people like, as Kari mentioned earlier, is you can get habitat certified. You need to include certain things, and you need to go through a review process, but you can get certified by the National Wildlife Foundation to have a wildlife habitat. You need to be providing food, water, shelter, nursery, which is the ability to birth and raise young, and you need to be employing sustainable garden practices. All of these things are very doable. The NWF has a lot of great information on how to do this, and the Conservation District is also happy to answer questions. So let's pause there for just a second before we get into rain gardens. And I want to see if we have any questions.
We don't have any questions yet.
I'm explaining everything perfectly. That's great to know. Or everybody has already tuned out, one of the two. Okay, so rain gardens. This is a good chunk of what we do at the community conservation team. Rain gardens have gained a lot of popularity recently in the last 10 years or so. The basics are that they are taking rain off of your roof and they are putting it into a well-drained area in your yard to infiltrate. One of the cool things from a landscaping perspective is that you get to employ a lot of plants that you otherwise wouldn't find. And they're also usually plants that you don't have to water very much. You can do some really interesting things, so some very interesting sort of more aquatic grasses and rushes. And you can also just kind of hide them in other types of native landscaping, but it gives it sort of an interesting area. I'll stop myself, but rain gardens are really great things to just kind of work through. So rain gardens work in kind of three elements. There's a soil mix of compost and sand. It's called bioretention soil, and it allows some water to be kept up that supports the plants, and it also allows water to infiltrate quickly. Plants that are comfortable with their feet being wet, but then also being very dry in the summer are the best plants to plant in a rain garden. They again provide a really unique look. And then there is a special shape and contour to the garden that allows water to be sort of funneled towards the plants and then also infiltrate quickly. They're a little bit complicated because you want to get them right, but they're not so complicated that you can't do them on your own. In fact, there's a lot of great guidance on how to build your own rain garden if you're interested. A quick thing on stormwater and GSI. So GSI stands for Green Stormwater Infrastructure. As Kari mentioned earlier about Workaday, overland runoff and stormwater has a potential to take a lot of nutrients, not in a good way, pollutants, heavy metals, bacteria like fecal coliform, and put it right into the waterways that support salmon, for instance. And this is obviously not something that we want. We want our waterways to be clean. We want them to be as natural as we can get them. GSI is meant to stop that. It intercepts water, and instead of allowing that polluted water to be discharged to the waterway, it infiltrates into the ground where the soil and the plants and the biofiltration process of the soil can mitigate some of those pollutants. It's really one of the simplest ways that you can help out your neighborhood and really kind of be able to brag about how good your garden looks because you're doing something beneficial for the entire community and your environment. Rain catchment. So as I noted earlier, the idea with native plants is that they do not need nearly as much water because they are adapted to our drought flood cycle. However, they still need some water. And one of the ways that you can really benefit, one of the ways that you can sustainably water them is to get yourself a rain barrel, capture runoff from your roof, which is much cleaner than runoff that you're going to get from your street. Roofs are significantly cleaner in general, and store that water. And then when the summer comes around and it's a little bit dry and your plants start to wilt a little bit, you can water them using that water. It's actually a small version of something that we call retiming, which also helps the water table because it's getting water in a period where it's not getting it from precipitation. So rain barrels are incredibly easy to maintain and install. We and the City of Everett sell them for very inexpensively. If you have questions about it, I strongly recommend you reach out because they're just neat. All right, let's talk about backyard prairies. So if you do not like trees, you go, I don't want to deal with a tree, whatever. Backyard prairie may be the way to go. Backyard prairies are very unique, extremely unique. They're very colorful. There are also a lot of lower growing plants. So they can still be a little bit more of a yard, but you'll be using a very different plant mixture. Native prairies in Washington are drastically reduced. They're actually the most endangered landscape in the state. They are also home to a lot of very specific plants you don't find anywhere else. There's a lot of reasons why this is. Development is a big chunk of it. Land rights is another big chunk of it. It is very complicated, but they're extremely rare. And having the opportunity to have one in your backyard, in my mind, is pretty darn cool. But they are they're critically endangered. So part of what makes prairies so cool is that the root systems continually grow, almost constantly. And while the plants above ground will often die back, the roots don't. They're very deep rooted. Their roots sequester carbon. So they take it in and then they bury it far down, and then the plants on top die down, and then the roots continue to grow, and the plants come back each season. Because of that, they are much tougher than your typical turf grass is. It's very shallow roots. It dies very quickly if it's smothered in any sort of way. The prairie plants are significantly tougher, to the point where you're just gonna have they require a lot less work from you. So having one in your backyard is very interesting. They're very unique. As I mentioned, they're one of the most unique in Washington State. They sequester atmospheric carbon, assisting climate change, mitigating climate change. They're very low maintenance. I will tell you right now, it says at the bottom there, do not collect prairie plants in the wild. A lot of the prairie plants that are, that I would suggest you would want to have in your backyard prairie are extremely endangered, and there are very strict management rules around them. So don't, if you see, like, for instance, Indian paintbrush and go, this is beautiful, I want it, leave it alone. Find a native nursery. You don't want to get in trouble for that, for sure. So before we move on to edible gardens, let's take another break and see if we have any other questions.
David, this is Kari. We had one from Facebook, which was, are there any specific tactics to attract and support possums?
To attract and support possums?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. If you only knew how much after my own heart you are. I love possum. They're wonderful. They eat ticks. They're phenomenal. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything specific to attract them. In terms of supporting them, that one I'll also have to look up. I don't know how to attract them, and I think that I might be careful on trying to attract them too much. Well, no, I'm actually not going to say that. I have some suspicions about that, but I need to, I will need to, please contact me with this question, and I mean that very sincerely. I would love to talk about possum with you. So yeah, please contact me with this question, and I will be happy to do some research and get a more substantive answer to you.
Thanks, David. I'll put your email in the chat over there, and then Philomena, I know, has some questions too.
It is also at the end of this presentation.
Okay, so this question might be a little difficult to answer. It came right the slide before the backyard prairie started, and Raven asked if you said retiming.
Yes, it did. I can, so retiming is a stormwater and conservation term that basically means taking water when it falls and holding on to it to discharge it later. And it's primarily for stream flow and water table management. I'll try not to get too technically in the weeds, but it's a process basically that says, hey, we're getting a lot of heavy inundation and then long drought periods. We need to take some of that heavy inundation and put it into the soil during those drought periods to try to maintain the water table. Rain barrels are a very small version of that. These things are usually done on the magnitude of hundreds and thousands of tons. But rain barrels are small versions of that. And every little bit counts genuinely. I mean, I know we're kind of, that seems like such a trite phrase, but it's very true.
Okay, we have another question about rain barrels. Kay says, roofs often get anti-moss treatments. Are these okay for rain barrels?
It depends very much on what the moss treatment is. Roofs are pretty clean, and for what you're going to use it for, I'm not particularly worried. If you're trying to grow moss, maybe not. But if you're thinking in terms of just like just putting it into the ground, yeah, they're usually okay. Again, it depends on the treatment and it depends on sort of what you're watering.
Okay, and then what about the granules falling from the roof into the rain barrel? Do they cause harm?
So I'm not entirely certain what you mean by granules. So I'll say a couple things. One is that rain barrels should always be covered and filtered. So they should always have, they shouldn't be open to daylight, for instance. And they should always have some kind of filter that's stopping debris from getting into the barrels. Additionally, rain barrels come with, the distance between the bottom of a rain barrel and the spigot on a rain barrel is called the sump. And that is specifically while water sits there, anything heavier than the water is going to fall down into that sump. And that's kind of a very basic method of filtration. So that's kind of how rain barrels normally innately handle that. If you're concerned about something coming off of your roof, if you have like an old cedar roof or something like that, for instance, you may want to invest a little bit more in a filtration system, which if you contact me, I'll be happy to talk to you more about.
We have one about rain gardens. We have from Kay as well. We have well-drained soil. Is a rain garden suitable for our yard?
Sorry, I just saw the next question down. That's a big old depends. I can tell you that rain gardens work well in well-drained soils, but there's a lot of different factors that go into what would make a rain garden work well, just including placement, topography, a lot of different stuff. So if you would like to, if you'd like to talk a little bit more about rain gardens, please contact us.
We have one more question on the chat box from Mike. Where are good local places to buy native plants, especially prairie plants?
I'm gonna go over that at the end when we're gonna kind of do a little bit of, hey, this is how to apply all the stuff that we're talking about. And I'll talk a little bit more about native nurseries then.
Okay, there's 2 questions left.
Right.
So the next one, Amy, what do you recommend as an alternative to grass over a septic drain field? Would prairie plants work? Don't want roots too deep.
Yeah. So I'm gonna talk like right at the end. I'm gonna talk about 2 kind of low growing alternatives to turf grass. I don't suggest prairie plants. I don't suggest honestly almost anything over a septic drain field. They really are difficult to work with, and there's a lot of regulations that go into using them. So short answer, we'll talk about that towards the end. Long answer, contact us and also contact your municipality and find out what the rules are.
Okay, one more. How do dogs mix with any of these options? We're dealing with former rock quarry, so we also have soil issues, which mean lawns are not very successful.
Okay, I will store this one away, and when we start talking about clover, I will tell you a story about a friend of mine who had almost this exact same question, and I will answer it then. Short answer, clover is probably going to be your best bet. Long answer, I'll tell you when I get there.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, great. Then let's talk about edible gardens. So edible gardens are great. I mean, who doesn't like food? I am definitely highly food motivated. You can grow food at home. Especially now, you know, it's just really nice to have, you know, some homegrown food to kind of rely on. I have heard people say that they think that it is too difficult. I have a black thumb; it won't work. I can grow potatoes in my little third floor condo. You get better by doing. You just kind of learn how to do it. There's also a bunch of classes, including wonderful classes at the WSU Extension. That they would just love to teach you more about this stuff. Because so many edible plants also rely on pollination, a lot of edible plants are really gorgeous. So you can, you know, you don't have to put together something that necessarily looks like the top right picture there. It doesn't need to be, you know, that sort of like a small farm. It can look however you want it to look. And you know, if you are just having fun, local food banks, you know, need food, especially right now. So there's a lot of great reasons to go with edible gardens. So I do want to just give a little bit of a disclaimer. I've done this sort of stuff before, but we actually have a person who specifically works on this stuff. His name is Joe Crumbly. He is our urban agriculture program coordinator. He is also on the community conservation team, and he is a great person to talk to about this. So in this instance, instead of saying, I don't know, you better send me an email and I'll let you know, I may just tell you to go talk to Joe because he may know more about this than I do. So lawns for food. There's a few different ways to approach this. As I mentioned, you know, you can look like the bottom picture there and have everything very rowed out, orderly. That's totally cool. That's a raised bed approach. Or you can have things look a little bit more natural, like that top picture there. It's, you know, typically called a food forest or just native planting. There's a process called companion planting. Certain plants work well together. If you really want to go down a cool rabbit hole, look up something called Three Sisters Agriculture. It is a mind-blowing technique that a number of different native tribes kind of individually pioneered. That is just, it's so cool. I mean, yeah, I'll stop myself because otherwise that'll be the rest of this presentation. It's me just talking about Three Sisters. But it's a really great kind of way to approach growing food, growing at multiple levels. And then similarly, you know, grow food that's actually from here. You can definitely grow, you know, like tomatoes and corn and all that stuff. I dated a girl for a little while who used to love growing, or used to love harvesting cattails, and she would make flour out of the cattails and like make cattail bread. There are a lot of very interesting plants that are native to here that are edible, and you can make stuff that you otherwise probably never would come across. And it's a lot of fun. If you are a garden hands in your dirt person, it's just a great way to kind of challenge yourself. Just remember, call Joe. He knows a lot about this stuff and is a great resource at the district to really kind of guide you through this process. We are here to answer questions. And he is sort of the best person to talk to. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk just a little bit about clover lawns. Clover lawns are great alternatives to turf lawns. If you have crappy soil, clover is a nitrogen fixer. It kind of brings its own nutrients, so you don't need to worry nearly as much about your soil being crappy or rocky. It doesn't root particularly deep, so it does a pretty good job of sort of staying in its lane. Doesn't get very tall, so it doesn't need to mow very much, but you can mow it. For instance, a friend of mine has a push mower, and that's a great workout. It's just going through and using that push mower. It also supports pollinators. We were talking about the importance of that earlier. Clover is a great pollinator support. I will call out, clover is not necessarily native. This is sort of one of those like native R situations. It's not native, it's also not invasive. It's not going to take over or cause any damage like maybe blackberry or ivy would. It is instead going to, if you put down a bunch of clover, you might not really be able to get rid of it. If you do want to get yourself like a turf lawn someday, or if you sell your house, those people are going to have clover for a long time, but it's not going to cause any damage. It also has the benefit of working really well for pets. It is vascular, meaning that it has a root structure, and it does a really good job of kind of binding up the roots. Dogs can run on it. Children can run on it. I did not mean to just equate children to pets, but it's very good for kind of being a little bit more of a typical turf lawn, but doing a lot more for both your own soil health and your environment. And then moss lawns. A lot of people come to me and say, David, I have moss. How do I get rid of it? And I say, well, you start by talking to somebody else. I'm not going to help anybody get rid of moss. Moss is great. It's that it gives you that really beautiful, beautiful green color. It's also good for pets, but it does tend to chunk up. If dogs get the zoomies and go tearing through that, their paws will tear it up because it doesn't form roots the same way that clover will. It also means that it won't get tall. So this is not something that you need to worry about maintaining. It just sort of stays that same size. It works pretty well in the wet Pacific Northwest, but it also requires a lot of shade. So it's a little bit challenging sometimes to get moss to fully colonize an area because unless you're just totally under a lot of canopy. It is possible. I have done it. There are ways to kind of push moss to really grow. There's a very gross one that I will be happy to tell you if we want to talk about that at the end, but I don't want to force that on people. But it is one of the cooler, in my opinion, things that you can do is to have, kind of this neat little mossy area. And I also just think that it's really pretty. So before we move on, let's take another break and see if there's any other questions.
Yes, we do have questions. To plant a clover lawn, do you pull up the original lawn? Is it planted by seed?
Clover lawns are most easily planted by seed, yes. I am not actually going to advocate for anybody pulling up their lawn. If you would like to sheet mulch your lawn, I will be happy. We're going to talk a lot about that. But pulling up lawn, it creates what we in restoration call the disturbed area. And there are a lot of plants that will readily colonize, a lot of invasive plants that will readily colonize in a disturbed area. So unless you have something that you are immediately going to put down in its place, you're probably causing more problems than you solve.
Okay, one more question from Raven. If you have a moss garden, will the people you sell the house to have a moss garden in perpetuity?
No. Moss is a little bit easier to get rid of. So moss does extremely well in some situations and really rough in other situations. So if you really cultivate a moss lawn, it means that it's very shady and it's very wet, um, and it has specific nutrients in the soil, which is great and good for you. But what the circumstances where they would essentially have like not be able to get rid of the moss, it would be like if they tried to, rip out all of the moss and then got to this area and they were trying to grow grass, they would get moss that would grow up between the grass. Like that's kind of the most common thing that people get. Is they're like, I have moss in this area and I want nice grass in this area instead. And like that is where moss is difficult to get rid of. But moss isn't like clover, where it's going to stay in the seed bank forever. Clover will stay in the seed bank forever.
That's all the questions.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about how to actually create a native garden. So it's very easy. You're going to do 4 steps. You're going to create a plan. You're going to take up some sod. You're going to amend, and you're going to protect soils, and you're going to plant native plants. So creating a plan is, Philomena can attest to this. None of my plans look like this. They are very simple. They're very, very basic, and that is totally okay. You do not need to have any sort of artistic talent or skill or 4 years of landscape architecture school to come up with these incredible drafting designs. All you really need is, kind of a piece of paper and a rough outline of what you want to go where, and something to sort of indicate the scale. You want to know your soil type. You want to know your sunny areas and your shady areas and your partly sunny areas. You want to have a general idea of your yard size, and you want to decide what sort of look you're going for. Soil type is fairly easy. Just dig yourself a pit, figure out, hey, this soil is really wet. This soil is really dry. My soil is very sandy. This is rocky. This is just some very general kind of characteristics. The main thing that you're looking for is how wet it is, how quickly water drains. That is one of the few things that plants will really throw a hissy fit about. If the soil does not drain, if it's a lot of clay, and you are trying to plant something that likes well-drained soils, it's not gonna do well there. Similarly, if you're looking for something that likes standing water, and this is this nice sandy soil that constantly gets water out of the way, it's not gonna do well there. Sun, shade, and partly sun are kind of the 3 characteristics that things get lumped into. Sunny is all day long. As soon as the sun comes up, these things are in direct sunlight. Shady is they're not ever really in direct sunlight. They're always underneath a tree, behind a house, things like that. And partly sunny areas are things, like, well, in the afternoon it gets sun, or in the morning it gets sun. There's some plants will be temperamental of like, well, they really like afternoon sun, they really like morning sun, they like midday sun for 4 hours. I don't worry too much about that stuff, but some plants can be that temperamental. Yard size, you just don't want to bite off too much. You want to get a pretty good idea of what you're looking for, and you want to understand how big the plants are going to get, so you're not accidentally hurting yourself in the process. And then just kind of look through and decide what sort of look you're going for. Decide, I really like, deep, vibrant greens. Look for plants that have, deep, vibrant greens. If you like color, look for color. If you are really into grasses, there's tons and tons of native grasses that you can get. So how to pull up your sod? Don't bother trying to pull up your sod. Turf grass is a wimp. Sheet mulch instead. If you really want to take your sod up, you can rent what's called a sod cutter. That's one right there. And basically what you do is you drive it in strips, and the sod, it goes along and it cuts the sod out. This is, usually pretty physically taxing. I was a commercial landscaper for a number of years, and a lot of my best workouts were loading sod, and God help us, wet sod, into trailers to get hauled off. The other thing that's kind of just not really ideal about that is you have these big areas of exposed dirt, what I called disturbed areas earlier. You can mitigate that if you put down a bunch of wood chips to try to keep some of those seeds from coming in. But to my mind, you're much better off just getting some cardboard, laying it down, waiting for the turf grass to die, put some wood chips over the top of the cardboard, and then, just planting into the cardboard. It's just going to be a lot easier. If you are looking to like fully and holistically swap your yard out, you're like, I have, 400 square feet of turf grass. I want it gone. I want beautiful clover in its place. That is the time that I would probably suggest go ahead and actually get a sod cutter. Tear it all out, make sure that it's timed really well. Try to do it when the grass is going to die anyway, and when a lot of plants will be dormant, because if you get Russian clover, it will latch and grow over the winter. Make sure the timing's right, and then get yourself a beautiful clover lawn. But just be really aware that you're going to have to watch it like a hawk for a while. And in the first sign of blackberry or holly tree, you're going to have to jump on it. Where to get materials? Lots of places you can get materials. You can go to material yards. There's a great one on Smith Island. They have lots of great stuff. You can get it delivered if you're getting enough. You can just call them and ask them how much. You can go to U-Haul and rent a truck. Obviously, be careful right now. If you're going to go out anywhere, make sure you take your masks. Do it yourself. If you have trees and one of them gets brought down, you can just chip it. Any tree that is of significant size, you really should have an arborist or a company actually of trained professionals take it down for you. Please don't go out trying to play Paul Bunyan with Douglas firs, for everyone's safety, especially your own. Recycling, if you're trying to make some, good topsoil for yourself, a great way to do that is to just compost your own food scraps and yard waste. We would be more than happy to talk to you about easy ways to compost. Arborist chips are really common. If you guys would like, I'm not going to assume to take time, but I will be happy to, if anybody wants to after this, talk a little bit more about sort of my quick tips for getting arborist chips dropped. They're a great way to get free materials, but you do want to, do certain things to make sure that it gets done right. Quick disclaimer down there: you cannot make your own rain garden mix. I have seen a lot of people try. Don't do it. A lot of people are like, oh, well, it's called 60-40. The ratio is right in the name. A lot goes into how this rain garden mix is made. The Washington Department of Ecology basically gave essentially a license to Cedar Grove to make the official engineered rain garden mix, because Cedar Grove was so exacting in the process and the ratios. Rain garden mix is expensive. It's a lot less expensive than having your entire rain garden fail and having to dig it back out. If you are doing anything that also that has to do with permitting, or you are getting money from the city or anything like that, it is also just, it's so much, it really does pay to just go ahead and get the right stuff made. Please do not try to make your own rain garden mix. Acquiring plants. Native nurseries are still open and working. Obviously be careful. Like going out to any store, there are rules. Talk to them beforehand. Make sure that you understand the rules for it. I can't suggest any place. That's part of our deal in the government, is that we can't say this is the place that you should go. I have opinions on lots of different native nurseries, and I would be happy to sort of field questions, but I can't tell you where to go. A quick search will definitely bring up a lot of them. And I would suggest doing that and then talking to them, asking them if they have the plants you're looking for. In some cases, you can harvest native plants. The correct way to do this is not really an option in 2020 right now. And that is going to a work party where they will do native harvesting for an area that's about to be developed. And then they will allow you to take some of those plants home. That's not an option right now, unfortunately. You can still, if you can still take, in some places, take plants out of the wild, but I want to make it really clear, crystal clear, that I am not saying that you should go out and do that. I'm saying that it is possible, and if you are interested in something like that, I would be happy to talk to you about doing it the right way. Seeds are great. You can similarly buy those from native nurseries. They're usually a lot less expensive, but it is going to be a little bit more risky. Established plants are always going to be more expensive because they have a much higher likelihood of living. And the Snohomish Conservation District has a plant sale. A lot of conservation districts do. Obviously, I care most about ours. We are in the process of doing this. I believe, Kari will correct me, we're doing this in early March or mid-March next year, which is not too far away.
It'll likely be the end of February, and pre-sales, it'll be a pre-order pickup only event. They'll open in January. So if you're on our plant sale list, you'll get all the details when it's officially and final.
Yeah, this is hands down probably the least expensive way to get high quality plants. Yeah, I'm not going to try to promote it too much. Because that's going to sound self-serving, but it's really true. It's probably the best place to get native plants. So kind of wrapping up a little bit, resources and advice. These are places that I look for my specific information and places you should reach out to. Washington State University Extension, obviously a great one. Snohomish Conservation District, great one. National Wildlife Foundation does the wildlife certification. If you are specifically looking for pollinators or invertebrates, the Xerxes Society is phenomenal. They put out a ton of publications. I consistently am using their resources. They're just awesome. Books that are very helpful. Grow Your Own Native Landscape. This is actually, this was put together by WSU. You can get a PDF of it online, no problem. If you just type in Grow Your Own Native Landscape, you will find the PDF for it. This is actually one of the textbooks that I had when I was in college for this. It's awesome, and it touches on everything. It has plant lists, it has techniques, it has a lot of really if you are really into like mini nursery practices, it has a whole section just on seed collecting, storage, and then scarification. And it's really, really interesting. If you are a homeowner in the Pacific Northwest and you are looking to get into native landscaping at any scale, you can't go wrong. It is free online and it's a wonderful resource. Similarly, free online, the Raingarden Handbook for Western Washington. This is actually the design manual that we use. Similarly, free online, developed also by Washington State. I just want to point out, Washington State University has done some amazing stuff, and that I'm being frank with you about the amazing resources they put out there because I am a current UW student. And it breaks my heart a little bit that I constantly praise Washington State University when I went to school at University of Washington for both graduate and undergraduate studies. So Washington State University, also the Raingarden Handbook for Western Washington. It really is kind of the Bible, and most Raingarden programs at the city and state level reference it in some way. And then if you do want to go for a backyard prairie, there is another free resource online called the Prairie Landowner Guide for Western Washington. If you don't, it's really fascinating. A couple years ago, I was actually camping out on a prairie, and that was just what I read in my tent every night, just to kind of like get more into this like Doug Oak or this Gary Oak prairie that I was camping in at the time. So strongly recommend all of those, and a dozen more. If you have specific questions, please again reach out to us. So let's wrap up with questions. That is my contact information there on the screen. I just realized that I didn't update my, that is my office number. I will try to get back to you. I am not in the office nearly as much anymore, but that email will get to me at all hours of the day. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Feel free to contact us. We will be more than happy to assist. And let's do one last round of questions.
Okay, Sarah says, how do we remove a yard full of gravel?
How do you remove a yard full of gravel? So I have a follow-up question. Is the gravel in the soil, or is it like a gravel, like a former parking lot kind of gravel? If you can shoot that back in the chat, I will be happy to give you a little bit more specific advice.
Okay, Kay asks, I've been told sheet mulching kills the soil by depriving it from oxygen, and that wood chips are better for removing sod.
No, I'm rarely going to just say no. I usually try to be diplomatic about that. No, and I don't know where that's coming from. So there's sort of two elements to that. Soil doesn't necessarily need oxygen nearly as much as the invertebrates that are in the soil need oxygen. Sheet mulching doesn't smother the ground in any sort of like oxygen manner. It's in any sort of oxidation manner. The majority of what they do is they actually just starve out the grass from sunlight. If you are doing sheet mulching correctly, if you're putting down burlap, it's permeated, oxygen is getting through that. If you're putting down cardboard and it's overlapping, there should be lots of gaps for gas exchange between the soil layer and the outside, and newspaper simply isn't thick enough. The first solid rain that you get, it's going to soak this stuff and it's going to become permeable. Just so that folks don't think that I'm talking completely sideways. I am a wetland scientist by trade. A big part of what we study is soil gas exchange and redox. So I'm not just talking sideways out of my mouth here. Like this is something that there's a lot of research that goes into. The problem with putting wood chips down directly on grass is that grass will grow through them. It will, unless you're layering it like 6 inches deep, which I don't suggest. You're not allowing for you're not suppressing the blades of grass enough to keep them from still reaching up. And then essentially what you've done is give the soil a lot more nutrients. Something else to note is that most of what gas exchange happens and most of where the kind of aeration comes from is something in native gardens is called bioturbation, which means that invertebrates in the soil are basically creating holes in the soil by climbing up from the lower levels and getting to the top levels where there's stuff that they can eat. Everything that we're suggesting to use for sheet mulching is stuff that those invertebrates are going to eat, especially after it gets wet. It's stuff that is going to decompose and is going to nurture. So yeah, I definitely appreciate your concern, and I appreciate that you want to make sure that like the gas exchange is happening. But yeah, that's not something that I would be concerned about. If you were managing to smother it somehow, I would say that you're probably sheet mulching way too heavily, which is something else that I'd be happy to talk about.
Okay, back to Sarah with the landscape gravel. She
Yeah.
answered, it's landscape gravel covering the entire backyard, no maintenance, lawn replacement.
I'm having a really hard time kind of picturing that. I don't think that I've heard the term landscape gravel, no maintenance lawn. I think for this one, why don't you go ahead and contact me, and we'll find a time to you can, if you want to email me photos, I will be happy to take a look at them and then get on the phone with you and talk about this a little bit more at length. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to be kind of taking shots in the dark as to what you mean.
Okay. Did you want to get back to that question about the dogs, options for dogs on a
Yes.
former rock quarry?
Yeah. So, yeah, the clover is probably your best bet. So a friend of mine is the sort of person, she's got a heart 2 sizes too big. And she is very, very, she has like 4 dogs, and they're all rescues. And they all were just tearing up her yard. And what I suggested for her was to put down a bunch of clover, because clover will grow in and around kind of through everything. Clover does a very good job of kind of bringing its own nutrients. The soil doesn't need to be particularly good for clover to take over. And it's hardier than turf grass or other stuff that'll get dug up. And it will recolonize fairly quickly. So like if your dogs start digging holes, clover will come back faster than probably anything else. So I would strongly suggest clover. You can get, if you really need something to grow fast, you can also get nitrogen coated clover. There's a few people that I think will probably push back on that. The excess nitrogen is not going to be enough to really mess with the soils, especially if they're as poorly rooted as you're talking about. Wait until after the first flush, so around now, when it's raining a little bit more consistently, and just toss that stuff down.
Okay, another question from Cheryl. What is the gross thing you do to force moss?
I always offer that and say I won't tell it unless people ask, and it never fails, somebody asks. Okay, so I had a client who really, really wanted mossy rocks, and the house was like a year old. And we were explaining to her that, mosses take a while to form and everything. And she was like, no, I know, but I just really want these beautiful, big, mossy rocks. So we bought these enormous rocks and we sank them in and re-leveled them and everything under this really gorgeous weeping cedar. And my boss at the time gave me instructions to go get this horrific, disgusting old blender, which, why in the world did we have this? And go and collect some moss, and a bunch of dirt, just like soil, a little bit of potassium that we would use to just kind of oversee different lawns. We do potassium and nitrogen and then this grass seed mix, and then a full quart of buttermilk, and you put it all in there into the blender and you blend it up into this pale green smoothie. And I went through and I just painted it onto this rock. It's not particularly gross, except that it smelled like rancid buttermilk for the next 2 weeks while the moss was getting established. If you really, really want to establish moss, you can make essentially a moss shake, and use that as kind of a jumping off point and really get moss working. As I said earlier, moss is non-vascular, so it survives being chopped up in a blender, and it just finds itself in this extremely nutrient-rich shake that then you can use to to make mossy rocks or trees, or just kind of paint it onto the soil or do whatever else. I don't really suggest it because it smells just god awful, and it still takes a while for it to establish. But it is I mean, yeah, the rocks look great. It took about 4 months, but they took off and they were beautiful. They looked like they were in the middle of an ancient forest that, you know, Oberon and the fairies lived in. So it works, but it's pretty gross.
Okay, if your yard soil is very hard and near impossible to dig, how many inches of rain mix would need to go on top in order to develop a rain garden? Is it even feasible for very bad dirt?
So the major thing that we're concerned about with rain gardens is water not infiltrating. And if what you're describing is, you know, that bad, it may form what's called the soil restrictive layer, which means that water won't pass through it. So that I would have pretty serious concerns as to whether or not it would be good for a rain garden. I can tell you, and the rain garden handbook for Western Washington will give you a step-by-step process for this. But there's a thing you can do called an infiltration test, where you get a post holer and you dig down and you fill up a hole in your yard to see how quickly the water drains. That will kind of give you the definitive answer as to whether or not a rain garden is feasible in your yard. That's where I would start. I don't think the book will say this, but if you are unable to get a hole to do that test, that's kind of your answer. Again, Rain Garden Handbook is great. If you have specific questions or you want to talk a little bit more, please contact me.
Okay, question from Chris. What do you recommend for high clay levels? My side yard grows viney morning glory and stuff, and ugly frond things.
Well, sorry about the morning glory. As far as clay stuff, are you talking about plants? What kind of plants would I suggest? Short answer, contact me. Long answer, if you're looking for plants, there's a great website called Great Plant Picks, and you can search for plants by soil type. Quick note, the other thing that you will need to know about that area is the sun level. That will have as much to do with what can go there as the soil type. In general, if you have things that, if you have a really intense clay level, things like sword fern, deer fern, grasses like native grasses, rushes, and sedges will work well. Blue-eyed grass, which is a type of flower, aster, beach strawberry. There's a few options. How about that? Don't contact me, and I'll be happy to kind of give you some more specific answers and ask you some more specific questions about your soil. In the meantime, don't lose hope. There are plants for everywhere.
Okay, Diana has a question about composting. Is there a way to compost in areas where rats are in the environment? I have been hesitant to compost in my yard as I do not want to draw rats.
Yeah, it's just about how you build a container. And there's ways that you can secure the container. When we do community composting projects, we have to be very careful to make sure that we are not making them susceptible to primarily raccoon and opossum. I mean, some people may just say for nuisance. For me, because that's very dangerous for the animal. So it just depends on how you need to build it. But yes, absolutely there are.
A question from Sandy. Is bindweed native? And if not, how do we get rid of it so it doesn't destroy new native plantings?
Bindweed is not from the Pacific Northwest. It is actually straight from the bowels of Hades. It's a god-awful plant, and I hate it. How you get rid of it is very difficult. Bindweed comes back from almost everything. It'll come back from a tiny amount of roots. It'll come back from any bit of stem that's left over. It's truly horrendous. What I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest that you go to the Snohomish and the King County Noxious Weed Board websites. They both of them together, and I do suggest looking at both of them, have very good resources on removing and dealing with bindweed. The major thing with getting bindweed is that you have to be very careful in removing it. You have to remove it very slowly. You have to make sure you get all of it. And then after you get rid of it, you have to dispose of it in the right way. It's absolutely noxious. It's a terrible, terrible plant. And they still, here's something else. They still sell seeds for it. I was at Home Depot 2 weeks ago, and I saw that there were seeds for morning glory. I cannot stress enough, do not buy and spread morning glory.
Okay, a couple of people wanted to share some notes. From Mary, just wanted to mention that I use Chip Drop for chips and going to Costco to the back of the store and getting their slip sheets that separate rows of product.
Mm-hmm.
By Chip Drop, I think she means chipdrop.com or get Chip Drop.
So I will take just a second and talk a little bit about Chip Drop. It's a wonderful resource. The only thing that I want to not even caution people, because that's not strong enough, but I want people to do when they order Chip Drop. First off, it's very easy to do, and it'll introduce you to local arborists who are usually fairly nice folks. When you are setting up your account, there is an option that says that essentially they need to call you first. They can't just drop it off at your house. They need to call you first. You absolutely have to make sure that they are calling you first, because there are some very critical questions that you need to ask. You need to ask how much you're going to get dumped, because they will probably want to dump an entire chipper truck worth, which is often 20 to 26 yards, which is a lot. You also want to know what kind of chips are being dropped, what the species is. If it is something invasive or noxious like laurel or holly, you don't want it, because you are probably going to end up having to deal with those in your yard. So you want to be very clear on what is actually being chipped. And then finally, you want to know what kind of things they will be dropping. They drop everything from just straight wood chips to log rounds to branches and things. And none of those things are necessarily bad. I know a number of people who really love getting the log rounds because they use them for firewood. Or maybe you have a neighbor that wants the log rounds and you can take the chips. But those are things that you absolutely need to ask about. Chip Drop has gotten really, really popular the last couple of years. And I think there's a few people who have been soured on it because they didn't take the time to really make sure that they were interrogating what kind of chips they were getting. And then they just kind of want to write off the whole service. And I don't want that to happen, because it's a wonderful, wonderful product. But you do need to ask some questions and make sure that you are getting exactly what you want.
Okay, and Kay just typed in the name Linda Chalk or Scott WSU, and I believe that would be for the arborist chips. She has a lot of information online. And that's all the questions. Lots of thank yous.
Hey, we did it, guys.
And then David, this is Kari. I just wanted to add that I've been scribbling down a lot of the things that David's mentioned to our attendees. So I'm going to send out those resources probably by the end of the week with the video. So that way you have what he mentioned as well as the slides. So thanks. Any other questions from anybody? Again, more thank yous. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending this evening. Thank you, David, for all the wonderful information. And thank you, Philomena, for going through the questions. So be sure to reach out to David D. Jackson at snohomishcd.org if you have any questions specifically to your property, because we can come out at no charge for free to come and take a look, because sometimes that's the best way to really get your answers rather than him guessing what it may look like. So any closing thoughts from you, Philomena?
No, just don't forget about the master gardeners. They're online and on the phone to help with all your gardening questions.
Cool. And David?
And I do want to note, if if you have specific questions, please attach photos in the email to the best of your ability. Right now, for obvious reasons, we're a little bit careful about doing site visits, and we have a lot more rules around site visits. And as such, it's a little bit more difficult for us to just, in the before times, before the plague, we would just say, yeah, totally. And I'd just, swing by on my way home and chat with you for a little bit. We obviously can't do that now. So we do have to be more careful, but it's certainly something that we still do. So please, reach out to us, but just be a little bit patient, because we have to work around some rules.
Very good. And so again, thank you to the City of Everett for sponsoring these workshops. And again, hope to see more of you next Wednesday at 12 for our rain garden questionnaire. Q&A. So we'll have a presentation on rain gardens, and then we'll answer some questions from you. So I see one hand up. Let's see. Did you have a question, Dan? Let's see. I'm going to allow you to talk. I think I can do that, or maybe not. We'll see. Sometimes it's tricky. Okay. Well, if you could write in the chat or just email us, thanks again for being here tonight. And then feel free to share the video on Facebook too, if you know people that would view it there. So with that, we will close and say good evening to you, everyone, and have a nice night. Thank you.
Thanks for coming by.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.